Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we are discussing Titanic. It was released in 1997, directed by James Cameron, stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, Billy Zane, and Bill Paxton. This movie puts you aboard the chaos of the Titanic. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 25-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. And let's talk about that having seen it. Let's start there. Guess who had never seen this movie before now? This guy. I think about this time, we're saying 97, right? And I feel like I remember when this movie came out, maybe there was a lot of hype beforehand, but at least in my circles in the school I was at, it was sort of a low rumble. It was this thing like, oh, a few people went to watch the Titanic. Then I heard people say it was good. Then all of a sudden it went to, this is the best movie. Oh my gosh, I've never seen a movie better than this. This is the greatest movie ever. And by the time that peak of like, everyone must see this movie hit, I was already in a space of, I'll wait till like it comes out on VHS or something after. I was like, I can wait to see it later. It's going to be no big deal. And then that later never came until now. Until ReReview. Until I was asked to ReReview a movie I've never seen.
You're breaking the form here.
Yeah, I know. Completely breaking the form. So my expectations of this film were, I'm trying to do the best to describe this. I understand things from pop culture from this film, right? I'm king of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I knew who the character Rose was. I knew I was going to see nudity. I know the draw me like your French girls. I knew the pop culture elements, right? Because people talked about it and you'd see it in places. But I clearly didn't know the movie. And I could tell you the way this opened, I did not expect. I had no idea that the first thing I was going to be presented with was like, this was a documentary of them looking at the ship underwater. And I know that may sound odd and obvious to everyone who's already seen this movie, but the idea I had of this film was that it was purely a romantic love story. And what I did not expect was documentary, love story,
treasure hunting,
treasure hunting, Tomb Raider, action scenes, shenanigans. And maybe I should have, because at the end of the day, when I finished it, I was like, oh, this is definitely a Cameron film. But I probably would have had a better idea of that had I watched this in 97 and not waited until now. Tell me about your 97 experience of Titanic.
Oh, I watched this. This was 97. So I was in junior high at the time? Middle school?
Boo.
So I think I went with my family. This might have been, and for the longest time, was probably the longest movie I'd ever watched in a theater. This is pre Lord of the Rings days. I don't know what expectations I had going into the movie when I watched it the first time. Being younger, I think I was probably more aware of, because I think by the time I was really aware of it was when people were saying they've gone 10 times and it had already been in theaters for like 2 months, which was completely out of the norm even back then. So like it had kind of like the same feeling that I feel Star Wars probably had when A New Hope originally came out. Mm-hmm. Like lines and people rewatching it and the pop culture that was attached to it in the immediate aftermath of the release, and then obviously as it kind of kept going. And so we went to go watch it, and I don't know what expectations I had for it were. I don't even know if at the time I was fully aware of the full events of what happened with the Titanic. Like I knew that it sank, but I don't know if I was even aware it was its maiden voyage at the time. I think that the movie and just the actual real events of the Titanic taught me the idea of irony and having an unsinkable ship and like be like, well, we don't need more lifeboats. We're fine. It's like, no.
Don't say even God can't sink the ship. You're asking for trouble.
I do think that like by time it was over, I remember enjoying the movie, but not really having I wasn't like in the same boat as like everyone else was at the time. It wasn't until probably it hit DVD. It had to be like early 2000s that I think I watched it again and I started getting kind of more into what it was. It is weird when you put it in the context as it's a James Cameron film,
Mhm.
because it is after, shit hits the fan. Like, it definitely feels like a
Yeah.
James Cameron film.
Right.
I think that if you watch this one after having watched Avatar, you can see, because I don't think before that, like if you watch True Lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was getting action James Cameron, during that era, Aliens and Terminator and everything else. This was probably the first movie where we got James Cameron. I'm going to explore with the camera because I can. I'm going to show you scenery for longer than you really want to see it because I can. And then you started seeing that with this, and then you got to see it with Avatar as well, where like you'll see a tree blowing in the wind just because he can do it. Like, it's not because it has a narrative. And he said it, like, it doesn't have to have a narrative reason sometimes. Like, I just want to get them emotionally in that moment. And this is where you first started seeing it from him.
Mm-hmm. Bobby, how about for you? What was 1997 in this movie?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys remember leading up to the release of the movie, hearing about what happened. So I remember hearing at the time that it was going to be the most expensive movie ever made. And I remember that it was originally supposed to come out like in April or a summer release, but it ended up getting pushed back to, I think it was right around Christmas that it actually ended up releasing. So I remember like hearing about just like the big spectacle of it and how they built like a gigantic hunk of the ship down in Mexico and all that. And so I was aware of it coming out. And then when it came out, I didn't watch it like the first day or the first weekend or whatever. I kind of waited a little bit. But I just remember that it kept being busy like every week and it kept like being the number one movie every week. And I watched it several weeks after it came out and my theater was still like relatively full.
That's mind-boggling.
It really had legs and like and one of the articles that I read before the movie came out was like, "Oh, this could be like the biggest movie disaster of all time because it was so expensive and it was so delayed." And a lot of times when movies are delayed, it's because, or at least like maybe the rumor is that the story isn't really working and that they're having to re-edit it and do extra things to try to make it work, but it seems like that wasn't really the case of this movie, and
I,
maybe it was just like Mexico weather issues or whatever that delayed it. But
I could have seen it definitely been like another Cutthroat Island,
yeah,
like just a box office bomb. And I think that maybe there was a version of this movie that was. I mean, how many movies have we heard about that editing saved the movie? I mean, Star Wars, Jaws.
yeah,
I mean,
sure,
movies where like the editing saved it. They had to go back and like, this isn't working. It could have been what happened, he could have been watching it like, this is just not the pace. Maybe, they had divided the movie up differently and everything else. I think that one of the things that drove this movie past the normal lifespan, at least from what I saw, was the Celine Dion,
yeah,
Oh,
the
music
radio
does a lot.
play.
yeah,
That
Oh my
that
gosh,
radio
yes.
play, that song. I mean, I'm sure Bobby is a parent. The Frozen, Let It Go probably was the
right,
thing. But that was what this song was. It was every 30 minutes on the radio. You heard My Heart Will Go On.
And you probably just nailed the reason why I was not anxious to see the movie.
The
Because the
oversaturation.
song was just so much. I was like, I'm good. I
Yeah.
am good. It's I feel like it's those elements, the things that I was very much surprised by in terms of not realizing that this wasn't just a love story. Because I felt like that's what everyone talked about. Oh, Jack and Rose. Oh my gosh. And there was a lot more to it beyond that. And that's
Mhm.
what caught me off guard watching it in this day and age.
I think that this, obviously they get the attention, but I feel like this movie benefited drastically from an ensemble of characters that were memorable,
yeah, for sure, yeah,
and helped support the movie from different areas. Obviously, you had, what was it, the unsinkable Molly Brown, great
yeah,
character. Even, the captain was a man of very little words, but like the story that was around him as like this tragic figure, stuck in the situation that he put himself in, via peer pressure.
Right.
Um,
Victor Garber was really good.
mhm.
I don't know what his role was. He just seemed to be like some kind of like operations manager of some sort.
Mhm. I think even like the random characters like the third class or what do they call them, like was it third class citizens or
Yeah.
passengers or whatever it was,
Yeah.
like it was like the Irish mom and the two kids or whatever. Like there was these characters that were peppered in there that technically didn't always serve a narrative purpose, but it was able to um, tell the story in interesting ways. Like if you wanted, it was almost like Cameron was like, I want to show, what was a foreign experience like on Titanic. So you saw like the Asian family who couldn't figure out the signs to escape, and they're losing their translation book to try to figure out, like, like where in the script would you put that? And like story wise, what does that really tell you? Like, I don't think that you would see that from anyone else, but there it was. And those are the kind of things that you do pick up on as you watch it the first, second, third, fourth time or whatever, these little small character moments that, play into the whole, even like the crew.
That was a really good point because in the movie itself, they're looking at it and it's easy to look at the Titanic experience as like a statistic kind of thing. And that's what even the researchers in the movie, like Bill Paxton's team, were doing. Like they had lost the human element that like there's a bunch of people that died on this thing. And I think they did a really good job of making it a little bit heartbreaking where I was like, okay, like most of these people are gonna die. And it wasn't just like a bunch of random people that you never saw. It was like personalities in the movie.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good
I mean
point.
that's a very good point in terms of caring about the whole. And I think this is what, tying back to that love story, me thinking it was going to be such a prevalent moment, I did not feel as attached to Jack and Rose and necessarily believed in the quality of their love, let's say, that I feel like other people may take from this film. So I ended up being a little bit taken aback by going, wait, this is what all the fuss was about? Like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, the whole thing felt ridiculous. So, okay, we have Jack, who's a character who conveniently wins gambles for tickets to get on the boat. Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you. Glad this is how you got on the boat.
But hey, the one thing that I remember thinking watching it again, the first thought was like, how happy were Olaf and Sven afterwards that they lost that hand. They're like, oh my, thank you. Like, I can't remember which one got punched, Finn or whatever, but like, go on. I'm sorry. That was actually, one of those things.
Right. I'm glad for going glass half full on that because it felt so cheesy. Like that scene comes up, I'm like, wow, he's gonna win this, isn't he? Oh, well, that's how we got tickets onto the boat. This is how the love story begins.
Well, was the idea of making that happen story wise that he wasn't going to have enough money to pay for a ticket? Like he was kind of like this, like.
I personally think the reason why he existed was because of the fancy dinner later on. So he could tell the story of how he got, because like that, it became an ongoing line through the movie after that, because he's telling his story and there's like, well, how did you come upon, the Titanic or whatever? It's like, oh, I won it in a lucky hand. Right. And one of the, the rich people or whatever are like, all life is luck. And then Cal's like, you make your own luck. And that kind of that mirrors, and it keeps coming up throughout the rest of it. So I feel like that scene probably was for that moment, which would carry on through the rest of the movie, which is, what's lucky, what's making your luck. Cause that's what Cal's thing was the entire time was he couldn't imagine a world where he doesn't control everything from his love life to his career to like all the stuff around him he controlled. I mean, even to getting off the boat. I mean, for all, and this is skipping ahead, for all my problems with Cal as a character or whatever, in the split of the moment, he found a way to get off that boat.
Yeah.
And so he did make his own luck.
Right.
So
he's just also a dastardly person.
He is. Right. He is.
Yeah. And point being, when like the way he got onto the boat was by just grabbing some random kid and being like, this is my child. He has no one else.
I mean, you do what you gotta do, right? No, well, okay, we could talk about Cal and Rose, and we're introduced to them. I kind of like the Picasso gag. I thought it was cute. Um, but as the characters, as I'm telling you, this time gap did a thing on me. Like I felt Rose was very annoying.
Wow. Okay.
Even the introduction
Start to finish. She was annoying, or
not necessarily start to finish, but definitely at the beginning. I was just like, what is going on? And I think just again being surprised by those pop culture moments. I had no idea King of the World happened so early in the film.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the climax or whatever, like right before
I
it
was
was
just like,
going
this
to go
seems
down.
like a very epic phrase. I was like, wait, it's happening right now? Okay, I guess. Cool. I didn't realize it would be right now.
It's funny because I feel like that moment, so it starts from when they get onto because like it's music, right? This is this is like the kind of like, swelling orchestral music, which did suck sometimes. Some of the times it sounded like they were using a really bad synthesizer for some of the music. Whereas like they had typed in like chorus, like a choir, and they were using a keyboard to do the choir at times. But during that particular moment, I feel like it actually was that swelling moment. It very much like reminded me of like, Jurassic Park, right? It was like, da-na-na, like, so you have that, like that moment. I feel like that moment was like the crescendo of that buildup from like, look how amazing the ship is. All these people, it's taking off. Again, he's doing 360 shots of the boat as it's going, trying to show the amazing CG effects and stuff that they did, which did hold up until you saw the CG people. The rest of it, I think, held up pretty well. But yeah, it builds up to that moment in the I'm a King of the World. It's probably putting too much credit where credit's due. It almost feels like, that was literally like, the Rocky on the stairs type moment. And like that moment of like, you're supposed to relate to it. And so I can see why, if you purely based it off the hype and the pop around it, you would think it would be something else. But
yes, and it wasn't that. Okay, don't get me wrong. Kate Winslet as Rose, I think as the movie goes along, gets better. You know who I found very annoying? Leonardo.
Wow. You didn't find him charming?
No, for me, I one of the notes I wrote down is like, I like older Leo much more than I like younger Leo. Because boy, younger Leo was very annoying for the entire film to me.
Do you have an example that stood out to you, or?
I honestly think just the character as a whole, I think I was just frustrated. Maybe this is where I did want the elements of the love story to hit me more, but everything felt rushed. Everything felt so rushed in terms of putting these two characters together for Jack and Rose. And, the idea of this affair coming out because Rose, presents as the independent, strong, intelligent woman who's being held down by the man, specifically her man, Cal, and men in general in this era of society and how the women approach each other. And she is this standout person who gets to be an independent woman in a world where those don't exist because she likes art, because she does things that aren't necessarily the same.
Wasn't that the conflict, though? Is the fact that she couldn't be those things she wanted to be. And like they were trying to prevent her from.
Cool. Fine. Except for that, like, I'm going to kill myself. and here's this little dude who's like, I'm going to jump with you. And by the way, now I'm going to love you forever for this like moment. And that whole conflict, I guess it just was, I found it very challenging because the next thing you know, she's head over heels for him and is having an affair. And it's like, wait a second, like, you really were looking for a way out.
I mean, like he kind of embodied what she was looking for, right?
Like freedom, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, I mean, we'll probably talk about later with the alternate ending or whatever, that she brings up, older Rose brings up is, she had the ability to be as rich as possible after the Titanic. And she was like, being a poor person because, she had nothing. She literally got to America with nothing. She had a whole new, and I know we're jumping way ahead, but whole new identity, everything else or whatever. She had nothing to really work off of. And she could have at any time, but, Cal and the world that she had come from was, and I think she even said, when she got on Titanic, and it was kind of hard, I don't know, hearing Kate Winslet say or whatever, the idea that it was a slave ship and she was in bondage or whatever. That's how she personified that world. And I think they did it later on when they see like a mom and a child teaching her to drink tea properly or whatever, and she could just see, her world. It was controlled, scripted for her. She could never do anything unique. And it wasn't until everything got lost that she's able to do something for herself, even though she was now gone from, a privileged, rich life to a poor, free life. And I think that's what Jack was supposed to represent, was ultimate freedom, which again, he said during the dinner speech, which is,
yes,
I was under a bridge and now I'm on Titanic with a bunch of rich people in a nice suit. That's how my week's been going,
Right.
And that's cool. And maybe I'm asking for an extended cut, which is probably a problem. You know me. I was like, can you just make this a
7 hour?
but I kind of wanted more from the pacing of what ends up being the relationship, because it just felt so fast from the, yes, he excited her and gave her this idea that they could be something more, but at one point she's turning him away. And then the next, things are getting escalated, and it just kind of, it felt rushed. And it's almost like, because I had attached so much to the idea of the love story, I wanted more. How's that? I wanted to believe they were in love. And by the time she's getting naked for him, I did not believe that, sir. I did not believe that.
So, I mean, it almost sounds like the problem you have, it's the same problem that Bobby has with some of these movies, is like you needed that, long courtship to believe that a romance could spark between two people.
Yeah, but what's weird is I didn't have that problem in this movie, and I don't know why. It's like you've said before a bunch of times. Whenever there's a relationship and somebody cheats on somebody else, it always has to be because the other person is the villain.
Yeah.
And sure. And I think that's probably what like made it okay for me. Like, and especially like,
oh my God,
when the guy became like increasingly violent, I thought like, okay, yeah, like this is, I mean, like it's one thing to be rich and to be like hoity toity and to be like, okay, like I have to like drink tea and I have to like, be all this. But if he's like seriously oppressive and is going to beat
and
her,
abusive,
like, yeah, like that's totally different. That's a totally different story. Like she's got to get out of there.
Yeah, but she's got to fulfill her mom's wishes of marrying into money because they're broke.
That lady, her mom was like the ultimate gaslighter. Like, that, like, I'm really curious as to what she did after the Titanic. Like, did she have to become a seamstress?
I was just thinking that. That's interesting. I mean, I wonder if she was kind of like Cal. She would have like hooked on to him and been like, "Hey, look, like."
Yeah, that's a great
I mean, not
idea.
like in any romantic way, but in a way like, hey, look, we were gonna be family here. Like, can we keep on that thing here?
Okay, so look, fine. Austin's a little iffy on the
love story.
No,
it's okay. I can see why. I mean, I think that it depends on the type of love stories you prefer in movies where they're well developed versus, I feel like this one tried to play into the spur of the moment nature of it. I think that
it really did that.
I do think that it was at least set up well enough that I feel like Rose's problems with the world were at least temporarily solved by Jack. Had the Titanic not sunk and they got off the boat, do I think their relationship would have lasted? Probably not. I don't know if it would have. I don't think it would have worked.
And this is what thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. I think that's what got me about the relationship, is I never saw sustainability. So I was very frustrated by the idea that she's so enamored because she was thinking so short term. And then of course the boat is sinking. So what are you going to do?
Yep. I'm fine with that. That's I mean, I'm not the biggest romantic or whatever as far as like, the movies go, because I feel like there's never been a true representation of what I feel like real romance usually is. And from my experience, it almost always like they get to the romance and then that's the end of the movie, like them getting together.
Right.
So there's very few movies where I'm like, I enjoy the process. This one, I think I was okay with because of the context. Like, what's that effect called whenever you, the tightrope effect, like where like it's the whole expression is that like whenever there's extreme danger or it's a really stressful situation that can cause people to
build a connection.
Build a connection or whatever. So I feel like that probably applies here. I think that was an
Mhm.
extreme situation, and we're used to Carnival cruises now, but it really was a big thing to be on something like Titanic back
Yeah,
then.
of course.
So I think I'm okay with it. It's about the same level as those little romantic novels that you see with Fabio on the cover or whatever. I think it's at that same level, just reverse. This isn't 50 Shades of Grey where the guy's rich and the woman's poor. It's the reverse. So I'll put up with it. It's not the worst one I've seen.
Okay, so let's get into the other stuff
Yeah.
then. I talked about the thing that I said was the priority of the film, and what I found out may not be. It obviously the big part is this action movie that takes over. This gigantic, insane, so much stuff that happens as they hit this iceberg. The tension, I feel like the anxiety that was built up because you're wondering how are they going to handle all this, even though we know the outcome. I did not realize it was going to be as epic as it was for how James handled this in the film. It's pretty damn epic, and they spent such a long time dealing with the epic nature of this thing sinking, and just the amount of time and again the amount of people that die. I have a note that said, "Oh, all the murders," because there was a lot of killing that was happening for prior to things going down. Like there was just a whole lot, and I called her what did I say? I think Tomb Raider Rose, because when she's going to save Jack with the axe and she's going through the water, I was very impressed, and that was the other part that surprised me a lot, was just the sheer amount of action and how much was really built around the sinking of the ship. Like it was a lot.
I mean, one of the things that I thought was interesting about it, and I think that all the people involved would probably say the same thing, is obviously the span of time that the Titanic actually sunk was significantly longer. I mean, it was about was it 2 to 4 hours or whatever that it actually took to sink or whatever. So obviously it's very squished down, but I feel like they had the sequences timed well enough that, because I think the iceberg happens about halfway into the movie, which is about like 3-hour movie. So about an hour and a half of the movie is when the actual event occurs, and then everything that happens after that is the sinking of the ship. And so there's all these events that occur. Like I feel like one of the notes I wrote down was like, how many times does Rose almost get off the ship and then back onto the ship in the span of this time? And then how many times does Cal offer to get off the ship and doesn't, and then chases? So like things kind of reset and happen over and over again. But I feel like there's a bunch of these moments that occur from the initial impact. And then there's this like soul building dread, and then you have all the different moments of what a disaster movie basically are. One of the better scenes that I saw was the when the bulkheads are closing, and all the anxiety. I know there's no way that dude's gonna get squashed by the door, but I didn't know that like if they were gonna go that far where like somebody's legs
felt the same way.
I was like, oh, and then it shuts or whatever, and I was like, but there was a lot of good scenes like that. I mean, even like the rat scene where the steerage class are like following a bunch of rats, and the Irish guy is like, wherever they're headed, let's follow them.
Right. That was smart.
Yeah, I appreciated all of those moments, and I feel like the things that they're underwater, they're behind those gates and they're trying to get out, and the guy like tries for 2 seconds and then drops the keys. But all that element of them about being to drown and just all of that felt not great, and which was exactly the point. The sheer volume of water in the scenes was also very claustrophobic, and they did such a great job of just making you feel like you were there and drowning, sadly.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. I mean, and I've really felt for the people that were under, like, there was that older couple who like just decided like, okay, this is it for us. We're old. Like we're done. We've lived together. We're going to die together.
And it's like when they're playing the sad music as they're going, and then like it cuts to like the mom and the 2 kids, and just like the realization that it is going to happen. And because like a lot of them were still locked behind the gate. Like they only broke through like one of them, so almost all the rest of them were still stuck down there.
Which is just, there's the gravity of it, right?
Yeah.
The people with money said, you don't get access to these boats.
Right.
Oh my goodness. I can't even with that. It's
Which is
just,
really smart because it also like mirrors the main story of Jack and Rose. You know, there was a lot of like little things like that in this movie that were really clever.
Wait, you mean that he can fit on the door?
there's that debate. I think that there is a lot of those kind of like little moments that occurred. Like I can't remember what his name was. He was the one that was like either the owner or the organizer or whoever that kind of made the captain go and go faster regardless of the icebergs. When he they're about to lower the boat and he jumps on the boat, and as they're about to lower it, the one crew just gives them this glare. And then you just like lower, and then you can just see this feeling of relief, but also shame,
Right.
in that moment. And then when the Irish guy or whatever gets shot during all the confusion, and he hits the thing, and because it's slanted, the blood starts going down towards the guy who shot him.
Oh, right.
Again, just these moments that like again don't really do a lot, but like you can tell there was a lot of thought put into visually what it was going to do and emotionally what it is in that moment, because then obviously the guy's like, what did I just do, and pulls the gun on himself.
Oh, that part was so heavy.
Yeah,
so heavy.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the band, the band that plays all their songs.
I mean, that part was kind of cool.
I do like the random moments that they would throw into movies like that where like they're playing, I can't remember what song it is that they're playing, and the Irish guy or whatever is like, even rich, like during a disaster, the rich people are still living it up,
right?
Because they
it's like, we'll take some scotch over here, please. Like someone's still during all this.
No, you nailed it. That was one of my favorite notes. The guy's name was Guggenheim, and he was asking for the brandy, and I was like, yes, sir.
Yeah, and
you're doing it the right way.
Do you know that's actually a true story?
Really?
It is. I think he went down with the ship, actually, that guy.
Well, yes. I mean, I hope.
But hey,
good.
like, yeah, if I'm gonna go down, I'd rather go down with a bunch of brandy than some of those other
give me every illicit thing on the ship.
Some of those other
we're all gonna die.
Bottom,
but like that, I mean, that's actually a good question, just as a person in that situation, because I feel like this kind of movie, if it's well done, and I feel like this movie was well done, puts you in the situation like, what would you do? The boat's sinking. Are you fighting to the very end? Like, Jack and Rose, like you're literally like clawing your way out, or are you like drinking brandy? You're like the band and you're just kind of accepting your fate and making the best of the last few moments.
Yeah. That captain scene was brutal where he's just like, okay, let me look at that. And then the other organizer guy is like fixing the clock.
I think it depends how much money I have.
How much you have to live for?
That answers that question. Like, how much money do I have?
I mean,
it is a good, thought process of trying to. I think the movie does a good job of putting you in that place of outside of the love story. Like, what would it mean to be on that boat during that time?
I mean, for me, that's a really hard question because drowning is a really terrible way to go. Like, I mean, it's not just like it's going to be quick. It's going to take a couple minutes of extreme agony before you go. And like, I think like, I would try to not go through that, even though like I might not have the will to live. I have the will not to drown, if that makes sense.
So you're finding a weapon and offing yourself is what I heard.
Oh, wow.
That's absolutely correct. Yes. I'll just jump off the top and crash into the propeller and do a bunch of flips.
Those ragdoll physics as it was falling down. I mean, it's just the idea of like, it's easy to, to watch a movie and say, well, I would have, done this. Like, I think that when I was watching, I was like, well, why couldn't you go to the church and tie some pews together? Why couldn't you take all those thousands? Like, they didn't have very many lifeboats, but they had lots of, life jackets. You could have like, tied a few of those together just to make something to float on. Cause like, really, you just needed to stay out of the water, right?
Right.
You needed to be able to keep out of that to potentially increase your chance of survival. Right. So, I mean, I think that's like the Mythbusters in me is like, what could I have done? That's like the equivalent of finding the door to get on.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel
I
like,
mean, even
yeah,
if you find the door, chances are you'll still freeze to death, right?
mm.
I mean, one thing they didn't really show in the movie is like, how did Rose not get like debilitating frostbite, right? Like lose her feet and her hands and stuff.
Maybe they did in real life and they just didn't want to get, because like that's one of the things that, like you have, it's the movie magic aspect of it, right? Because realistically, if you were, on one of those life rafts and you were looking at what was going on, you wouldn't see anything. There
Right.
was no
Yeah.
light, there was no moonlight, there was no like, you would just see pitch blackness, which is
Right.
terrifying.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
super
Yeah.
terrifying.
I mean, you'd
Um,
probably hear stuff like hear the screaming
oh
and hear the
yeah,
crashing noises, and
for sure. So
which is
there's,
which is terrible.
yep. So now we're getting the
Yeah, that
tragedy aspect of it.
makes me sick to my stomach even thinking about it. Which again, that means the movie did a good part there. I look at as the people were jumping off the boat, as the boat sinking, as the lifeboats went out. We had the moment where they're at the beginning of the loading, like, why did you only put 12 people on this lifeboat that fits like 70? And I
Right.
was like, oh, because they're rich. It's
Yeah.
it's just it's vomit inducing, and I thought it was kind of neat that they had at least the one. I said compassionate leaders the way I referred to this person, but of the one lifeboat who kind of said, let's shift people over and go back
Yeah.
and
yeah.
look
Right.
to see if there's more people. But I know that facilitates Rose being rescued, but considering how terrible everyone was being to each other, it was like nice to see someone just take like a step of compassion
Well, and
just a little
they
bit.
they had that moment too where Molly was like,
Mhm.
that's our men. We need to go get them. We need,
Right.
we
Yeah.
have we have the ability to. We need to go. And then one of the crew members
Mhm,
like, no, they'll tip our boat. We'll all
mhm,
die. And then you had the moment with the other crew member. I don't know what his name is. I know that he played Mr. Fantastic in the Fantastic Four movies or whatever.
Ewan
mhm,
Um,
Griffiths. I
yeah,
think that's how you pronounce his name. Ian Griffiths.
because
Ewan
he was
Griffiths
he was
something.
the one. I think he was the one who saw the crew member who had shot himself as well. I think
mhm,
so. He was like one of those characters. Like I don't even know if they really gave him a name, but he
Mhm.
reappeared throughout the movie. And so yeah, he had that moment. It was like, all right, let's tie the boats together. Let's
mhm.
transfer
Yeah.
people over. And then
Right.
what was it? Rose said later on, like only like 14 people were saved out of the
Right.
water.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
but it took so long. It took him like half an hour or something like that to get around to that point.
Right.
Mhm.
But you do kind of understand the fear of it. If you're sitting there on a boat, you made it, and you can see it, people are probably going to swamp your boat. Do you go back?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
So I
Right.
kind of
'Cause
can't blame them either. Too, I can see the
no,
fear.
Right. Right. For sure. Yeah.
you're trying to live, right? Yeah, it's the weight of it. We didn't get too much into the tech aspect, so I do want to ask. CG's still pretty good. Maybe not all of it, but it looks pretty damn good.
Yeah. I mean, they clearly like were at the top of their game at the time, which is a combination of all the tricks in the book, like forced perspective, models, using CG where they could, like I'm sure there was a whole bunch of hidden tricks. Like, I think that they only built like half of the boat, like split it straight down
Mhm.
the middle, and then built the half and then flipped it for the other side of it.
Mm,
So
Mm.
I think
probably,
that's
yeah.
so there's a lot of really interesting hidden tricks in there that, and of course, like James Cameron is just a master of the craft. So yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, all that stuff is really well done. And sure, like some of the compositing maybe doesn't hold up as
Mm.
well as it does, but I mean, that's really like nitpicky.
I did like the shot that it was very much like the Saving Private Ryan shot or whatever, where it went from after Rose and Jack did the dirty, and it was right before when she was on the chair and she's being drawn and she's like, oh, it's the most erotic moment of my life or whatever. Like it goes in on young Rose's face and it starts turning
Yeah.
to line up her eye, and then
Right.
it fades, transitions into old Rose's eye, and then pulls back out again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I really like those kind of shots when they're well done like that.
Yeah. And they did a couple other things like that. Like they did the like dissolve from the 1914 Titanic to the undersea, like all destroyed.
Oh, those
Titanic, and
underwater
it was
shots
kind
were
of,
great.
and it looked like it was like a match move from
Mm-hmm.
the old shot to the new shot. So that was really neat, and it was also like a reminder that like, oh, this is where we're going if we
Mhm.
had forgotten.
Those shots were really good, especially like all the underwater stuff, like seeing the behind the scenes, the fact that obviously none of it was underwater. It was just like
Mhm.
using smoke and lights.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I love how they made it look. And then because they did that a couple times where they would transition, because they did it later when Jack and Rose were on the front of the boat. And then they transitioned
Yeah.
to the ghost, which uh good job on sound design for them, because they would, anytime they went to like the underwater ship part of the ship at the beginning, middle, and towards the end or whatever, they would have like small hints of like music or sounds, like people making sounds and stuff. So it was like this
Right.
haunting like ghost ship
Right.
feeling
Yeah.
to it. So you had the beauty and majesty of when it was in its prime and then underwater.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to Mr. Cameron for that, or
Yeah,
whoever did
I
sound.
agree.
Well, I think we could talk about old Rose now.
Yes.
Good old Rose. Old Rose likes to keep very fancy jewelry hidden away
Yes.
from the treasure hunters who want them so badly. And we watch Rose, basically make peace with the entirety of the event after living 100 years and tossing the what was it called again?
The
Heart of
heart
the
of the
ocean.
ocean.
The heart of the ocean, tossing that into the water where she went through this insane trauma to then go to sleep and maybe have a dream, maybe pass away. I don't know. You make whatever you want. Reunites with
She was
Jack
gonna
and
die old in her bed, warm in her bed, and not
Mm.
frozen,
It
according to Jack.
was a nice callback. They did a good job doing
Mhm.
that in the script. I always just made the conclusion that she'd passed away just the way that it was
Yeah, I just thought
filmed.
the same
Oh,
thing just
that was my
because they
note as
said
well.
that. Yeah.
I said, "Oh snap! I wasn't ready for her to pass away."
I
that was my note.
like I watching it the first time and all the times I've watched it since then, and then this time, I still think it's like a beautifully done moment with the music and
Mhm.
everything else and the camera work, especially like it again, the camera goes to the ghost ship and it transitions back into the beautiful Titanic, whatever. You get the first person point of view, which by the way, when the door opens, you can see the camera in the glass.
Yeah.
No, you can't. I didn't notice.
Go back and watch it. You can see the camera operator in the glass.
Yeah.
But I'm still to this day, it as beautiful as a moment as I thought it was, it still bugs me that I'm seeing the thing is like, she had a full life afterwards. She had a husband.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Right,
she's
yeah.
out here
Yes.
going into the afterlife with Jack and making out with him. Like that poor
Uh-huh.
guy. Like he just
Right.
got ghosted.
Oh, literally.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
That was good. She didn't even know what ghosting was, but she did it. Oh my gosh. Let me think here. So she passes on. We get this, that epic moment. We get that sense of release. She's in this place. We have our love story. Yada yada yada. Movie ends. Bill Paxton doesn't get his treasure. Cool. Apparently, there's an alternate ending. And I forced you both to watch it because I watched it. Do you know when this alternate ending was revealed and or made available to the public to consume?
It must have been like a re-release or something where they put it on like a Blu-ray or
Yeah. That's what I would think too.
it should have stayed wherever it was. That's all I can
agree.
say.
Just buried in the ocean.
If you have a
with
chance
the-
to watch it, watch it. It's odd.
It's an odd thing to take in, especially after you go through the story. Because I felt like the and again, this is definitely an aside because it's not like the movie. The characters we interact with, Rose is like just this completely different woman who is like, I got a jewel, don't you come near me.
It's just wrong on so many levels. It's wrong from a character perspective. Not because I didn't think that like maybe Bill Paxton's character would have done what he did
Mhm.
by the time because I feel like, like Bobby said, the story was humanized
Mhm.
for them. But at the end of the day, how much money and time and investment was invested in this whole thing for him to
Right.
be like, thanks for letting me touch it. And then it gets thrown overboard.
Right.
And then
Right.
he's like, do you want to dance? It was just,
It was
this
weird.
awkward moment where none of the characters kind of were what they were prior, what we had just seen.
Mhm.
It was the acting felt like it dropped off. Like, I think I made a comment. It felt like, it was the second director directing it or something, second unit. Because like none of them were really at the same level they were for any of the other scenes.
It feels like the studio requested it, and so they like did it bad on purpose.
But here's the catch. There's an element, maybe this was the true first ending, and the movie actually was the alternate ending.
It could be. It's happened. I mean, a lot of them have turned out that way or whatever. And maybe,
right.
Maybe he just wasn't happy with it. Maybe that was what got delayed. Maybe they went back and refilmed. It'd be interesting to look at that footage and then look at what was in the movie and see which one looks like it might have been first. They might have went back and refilmed the ending because of it, because it is such a weird ending. Like, I get what the alternate, ending was supposed to get at, which was he had let go of, his obsession, everything was humanized for him. Rose's story was somehow, she got, more dialogue, about like what she learned and everything else or whatever. And, I get what they were trying to go for, but what they ended up doing in the actual theatrical version did those same things, but way better.
Yeah. I have a logistical question about this gem thing. Is there not a way she could have like sold the thing without having it be traced back to her? Like after Cal died, after her mother
She
died,
changed her
like
name.
she can't go to like Pawn Stars or Pawn
Well, and that's one thing that the alternate maybe original ending tried to address, right? Was she did say she had in her pocket the means to become insanely rich. And as a poor person, there was always the temptation, but she didn't do it because of Cal. She saw what money did to people and never wanted to do that. So it wasn't like she was sitting there thinking, oh, I need the money. She probably did every once in a while, and maybe it was a temptation. But I don't think it was like she was afraid somebody was going to find out who she was. I just think that to her, that represented everything that was wrong with the world she had come from. And to her, it belonged in the heart of the ocean, right? Like it didn't belong in the world of men, because it's like the goblet or the Christ cup or whatever.
Yeah.
From Indiana Jones, the Holy Grail. Yeah. It's like, it shouldn't be possessed. Right.
Or
and I feel
ring.
Like, I feel like that's what the heart of the ocean represented. We had to get those Lord of the Ring references. I mean,
I do appreciate both the Indiana Jones and Lord of the Ring reference. Okay, I'm gonna finish with this. One of the things that I did appreciate, and this is a quote from something else, but it's "You only live as long as the last person that remembers you." And I did love the fact that ultimately Rose's thing was to remember Jack, because no one else was going to know who Jack was, and that part of the love story I did actually appreciate, because life is hard, and when you have connections with people, you got to cherish them for as long as you can, and try to keep people's memories for as long as you can. So with this very extended film, even though it wasn't the extended cut, you have now listened to an extended version of ReReview. Bobby, knowing that this movie definitely exceeds your time length quota for what you want from a movie, do you recommend Titanic to the people?
Yeah, who on earth hasn't seen this? Come on, man. What are you people doing?
Dang.
No, I mean, if you haven't watched it, I mean, it's one of those where, for the pop culture, for the experience, for the historical aspect of it, it's definitely worth watching in my mind. Even if you're not going to fall in love with the love story, so to speak.
Attack on me. Matt, how do you recommend this movie?
I agree. I think that if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. I think that if you have, it's worth watching again. I think that there's something in here for everyone. I think that, if you're somebody who loves movies, it's a great movie. I think if you like romances, generally speaking, you'll enjoy it. I think that if you're looking for a disaster movie, it's a great disaster movie that doesn't go Roland Emmerich, where it's, contriving at times. It's a good disaster movie to watch. And it's a nice drama piece. I had some feels watching this, even though I've seen it lots of times before. I still get feels sometimes. So yes, watch it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with you both, obviously for different reasons. I know they bring this around to theaters quite a bit. They'll do like repeats and stuff. I want to go take it in the theater and kind of pretend it's 1997 again and get that experience. I think it would be worth doing. Definitely for every reason you said, from the pop culture standpoint, from understanding what this film did end up meaning as a whole to people across the board, why it was such a big hit back then, and then also why it's still one people turn to. It's worth watching. Absolutely, get the popcorn out. I am definitely a big fan of the disaster movie part of it, I will say, but yes, please watch the Titanic. As always, thank you for listening, and I'm sorry that I didn't build you a stronger ship.